When I communicate with people, regardless if we agree, I first have to see that person's humanity.
The only reason that you feel guilty about your abortion was because you became a Christian. No, Jesus is the only reason that I don't feel guilty about it anymore. My first aborted baby, I named Mary Elizabeth. Mary after Mary, Jesus' mother, and Elizabeth after her cousin. Because that story was, as a relatively new Christian, that story was so compelling to me. And the second baby I named David because that was later in my walk with the Lord, and I had read a lot about David and thought that that would be a great name for a little boy that I might have had.
For a while, I was going through healing and really struggled with that. Like, I had a person say, oh, you should name the baby this, and it just didn't sit right with me. But after praying about it, and it came to me, and I just was thinking of the name Jose Miguel, and I actually have it inscribed in a ring that I wear all the time. Jose because of Saint Joseph, and Miguel because of Saint Michael, the Archangel.
I did the same thing a couple years ago. At that season of my life, there were two men that were very prominent in my life, and so I named my son Michael Edward Fraser.
My son's name is Boyd, B-O-Y-D. That's my dad's name. I always liked it, and it's my middle name. It gives me some kind of connection. I have not memorialized him yet, though. I haven't let go yet. I'm still healing. I think I'm past third base, but I may be walking all the way to home the rest of my life. I'm not quite sure about that.
Yeah. When I thought about the names and the gender of my children that I aborted, the Lord gave me Karen. That was my first baby. And then a David, Timothy, and Spencer. These names weren't particularly important to me, but I just felt this is what he would have me name them. And just to tell you what a good God he is, my fifth baby I gave birth to, life to, was Hannah. And then I had two sons, Heath and Hatch. And then I had a grandson. So the Lord gave me back what the enemy stole. Yeah. And he's just an incredibly faithful father. Amen. And I'm so thankful.
Amen. Well, I have a name for my aborted twin, and I wrote a letter to him just recently, and I just said loving brother, but I think I'm going to name him Robert. And then my aborted babies, little Lance, because his dad's name was Lance, and Michelle was the second because her dad's name was Michael.
Well, I named my first conceived child Daniel, but see, I did that after my late wife and I had had children. We had a miscarriage between the two children that we had, and the name that we were choosing for this child, and we felt it was going to be a boy, was Daniel. So when I went through the process of naming this child and memorializing it, and I work for 40 Days for Life, where we have a memorial to the babies that were killed at that now closed Planned Parenthood facility where 1,600 babies were killed. Well, I have a plaque there, and I named him, I have Daniel Steveland, my firstborn. Steveland Morris is the real name for Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder has always been my favorite. I've felt a drawn kinship to him ever since the first time I heard him sing.
Have you been to the National Memorial for the Unborn where your plaque is?
Well, no, mine's is actually a 40 Days for Life, but I've never been to the National.
Is that the one in Tennessee?
In Chattanooga. I went there last year, and I was not prepared for how completely overwhelming it was to walk into this. This was a former abortion clinic. When I walked in and you see thousands of these plaques.
I've seen pictures. It's
oh
on the
my
internet.
gosh.
Yeah.
And it took a while to find mine, but still, and my son's is also there. It was so overwhelming. I just I mean, there's a place to sit. I just sat and cried for an hour just to know that every one of these, not just the babies, but the women, the pain that was on this wall, the amount of pain that was on this wall was just, I'm an empath, so I was just all over that, you know.
I have a question for you, Jessica. Being that you're the only one here at this table that chose life, how does our stories affect you?
Well, it definitely brings to light God's grace. I think that's the most important thing that I've learned and noticed today, hearing your stories. But it definitely impacts me in the form where it gives me more knowledge, to have more compassion, to have more understanding, to take the time and the opportunity to listen to others rather than judge or be quick to say, well, if I was in that position, I wouldn't have done that, which I think is what a lot of us do when we're speaking with those that have had abortions but are now pro-life, and being able to connect with other women that are not necessarily pro-life yet.
Thank you.
You know, I've got a question, I think, for you two. When I was going through my first experience with abortion as basically a teenager, someone's 19 or 20 years old and out of control, and not really a man, but I sometimes would ask myself the question now, where was the man or the men who that may have been able to speak into my life? Where was a person who may be like me today? How do we get that connection to the other side? Now, I take full responsibility for what I did, and yes, I probably would have just found my way around it, but where are the men? How do we make that impact into these guys who are really, you know, men in body, but children in their lifestyle and experiences?
When you say that, you reminded me of something. I was a huge people pleaser, and I did have men in my life. The problem is, as I mentioned before, they were pressuring you into living a certain way, into being sexually active, right? That was the cultural norm of being a man, right? You have multiple women, you sow your oats. I did not have godly men like I do now who would sit me down and say, what you're doing is wrong, in a loving way. I can't say that I had that.
And then give you some direction. Well, here's what I can help you go through. I'm going to take you to this. Well, we didn't have a lot of pregnancy resource centers then, or I'm going to take you to this pastor. I'm going to sit you down with a friend of mine, a godly friend, just so you can hear the truth, and you know you're going to make a decision that's going to affect the rest of your life.
You're hitting on a piece of what's been bothering me for quite some time. Again, getting men to come forward for healing and so on. To me, those men, if they were to do that, they would be an army.
Yeah.
That we could call on to be able to speak to young men. Mm-hmm. And one of the major things that I've been told about and I've experienced myself and so on is that the culture has gotten men beaten so down. We've been disenfranchised, if you will, from the entire abortion thing, that it's really hard to go out for recruitment even, if you will. I don't know what it's going to take to get that culture change. I believe it's actually happening right now, where men are not always being called toxic, even though many of us were, and so on. But I think we need men that have been through abortion, that have had problems like me, not having even a family afterwards, and so on and so forth, to be able to reach young men to tell them to choose life, and the importance of doing that even for their own souls. But our culture has gotten them beaten down to do this. Irrelevant, completely disenfranchised. Yeah. I don't know how to solve that problem entirely.
Just keep speaking up. I mean, I think we all have these stories, but there's a bigger picture underneath it all. And it's been, percolating for decades, starting with, Alfred Kinsey and the rotten education that he brought, Margaret Sanger, Planned Parenthood, the sexual freedom revolution, which I was got caught up in that. I don't know how bad it's got to get before it'll turn, but I think we're seeing somewhat of an awakening. The army is going to come.
I think things are happening. There's an awakening going on right now, and I'm really optimistic about it.
Yes.
And
So counter pressure.
I'm trying to be part of it. I'm trying to be part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I discovered in that arena is what my son, when he was 19, found out that his girlfriend was pregnant, and he was excited. He wanted to marry her. She did not want to get married. We even had a family that was willing to adopt his son or daughter. Then he got a phone call that said, "Guess what I did today?" And it completely crushed him. I mean, to the point where he did all the things that most of us do as women, the promiscuity and the drugs and the alcohol. I mean, this is my boy that just loved kids, was going to be a children's pastor, and not only turned away from everything that he had believed in, even turned away from the career he thought he was going to have. And when I finally convinced him to talk to, because as his mother, I couldn't do any counseling with him, convinced him to talk to a counselor, who then told him that the things that he was feeling inside really had nothing to do with the abortion, and it had to do with something else. And they needed to get to the bottom of whatever that was. So I also think there's a ton of education that needs to go across, because that's not the only counselor that I've heard that has done that. Secular counselors on the whole will not even entertain the thought of talking to you about abortion, because it's just not a big deal. So I don't know, that's another area that, as somebody who does counseling and works in the counseling arena, am trying to figure out how to open that door to get true help for men and women.
I had the opportunity to speak to 7 or 8 pastors with this notion of bringing in the idea of healing men and then speaking to younger men, the connection with that. And not a single one of the churches wanted to even touch it. Not one.
Wow.
Yeah.
So again, could have been me. I told them it didn't have to be with me. You can do it on your own, and I could help you. That sort of thing with some of the information I have, but not one. And not one would even follow up with me afterwards to tell me why they weren't interested. Maybe one mentioned that they just didn't have time.
Yeah, that's part of the problem. A friend of mine said that, when I was seeking, input on how to present, what issues should be presented, and one of them was that the Christians don't want to talk about it either because it's evidence of sin. I thought that was pretty profound, because denial isn't a river in Egypt, I mean, it's in the churches. We talked about this earlier, how churches won't let us have pro-life speakers, and our pregnancy centers have speakers that church members attend, right? You have those events, but it's to speak in front of a congregation is kind of very rare.
It's rare.
And same with like counselors, it sounds like. There's just a lot of denial. Planned Parenthood has, we've been in this field a long time. Post-abortion syndrome? What's that? It doesn't exist, and Planned Parenthood tries to make sure it doesn't. We know it does. But when you say that to a group that is not pro-life, they're just going to say, oh, you people don't know what you're talking about, right? So it's hard to persevere and press on in the truth. So I don't know, I think we need to help each other with the tools to do that. And storytelling is a big part of that.
Doctor, I have a question for you. Now, having gone through the experience that you've experienced, what does it mean now to do no harm as a medical professional?
Well, what you learn, first, do no harm is one of the cornerstones of what we call modern medicine that Hippocrates wrote about. He had the 4 basic tenets. No relations with your patients, patient confidentiality, no euthanasia, no abortion, but also first do no harm. And it's very interesting about the human nature. When we're given a commandment, it is a tendency of the human being to sin, to not adhere to what God tells you to do. And the simplest explanation for that is just to go back to Adam and Eve in the garden. They were given everything and they had one single commandment, told not to eat from this tree over here. But what do? Well, I want to get to that tree. Just one commandment. That's why there's no such thing as an exempt human being from the need for being saved by Jesus Christ. Nobody gets by on getting away with sin nature. So we just can't follow righteous, simple instruction. No, first do no harm. We want to find a way around that, right? Well, the baby's going to have Down syndrome. The baby's going to be anencephalic.
Sounds right.
Or the baby was conceived and raped. Thereby the baby gets capital punishment for daddy's sin.
Mm-hmm.
We want to come up with nice, catchy terms and euphemisms that are nothing but things that placate and accept the evil. It could be abortion, it could be anything. It could be infidelity or whatever. Oh, well, your wife doesn't satisfy you. Therefore, that's license to go out and cheat. You see, so and that's what we deal with each and every step. This is a spiritual battle we have to step. So each and every step that we need to take to adhere to God's principles is going to be met with opposite action from the enemy. Each and every human being that has been born, is living now, and will be, is a reminder to the devil about the image of God. That's why it goes after preborns. That's why it goes after gender issues. Anything that affects the image of God, which is the beautiful human being that was God's final creation, where he said, it is very good.
Absolutely.
I think for me, I know when I talk to a group of people, and there's almost always a handful who, want to argue, take down the things that I say as not true. In fact, one even said, the only reason that you felt guilty about your abortion was because you became a Christian. And I was like, no, Jesus is the only reason that I don't feel guilty about it anymore. But what I've learned over the years is that when I share anything about abortion to somebody who I may not even know that they're post-abortive, they immediately defend it. And that's almost a giveaway for me to know that, okay, so now we're justifying, so let's get to the meat of it. And I think that's the biggest problem that I've seen in trying to talk to people about pro-life issues, is that many of the people that come want to justify the reason they did what they did, because if they don't justify it, they have to deal with the guilt of it.
Right.
I would add that one of the things I'm learning over the last couple of years is God loves us. And there's nobody that loves people more than he does. And so when I communicate with people, regardless if we agree or disagree, I first have to see that person's humanity, right? And I don't, I'm not going to like you because you agree with what I'm saying. Or how do I respond to you if you disagree with what I'm saying? As a parent, there's absolutely nothing my kids could do that will cause me to stop loving them. Now, they might feel that I don't, but they don't control how I feel about them based on their actions. However, as a child, there are seasons that I felt like my parents didn't love me. It wasn't true, right? And so when we communicate with people, I think that message also gets communicated to them as believers, right? There are people who feel like if they don't agree with the church, or if they don't agree with what this person is saying, then we're going to isolate them, we're going to stop treating them a certain way, and we have to do better. As the church, we have to do better, right? So there is the idea of knowing things, and then there's this concept of walking that out, right? We know that these people need the hope of God, right? And if we can communicate that regardless of whether you agree with me or not, I am going to love you.
Yeah.
I'm going to be kind to you.
Very good discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for being so open and loving. Thank you.